As humans, we're constantly bombarded with information and stimuli that our brains have to process. Our brains do this by using cognitive frames to categorize what we're experiencing and give it meaning. In other words, a cognitive frame is a mental map or frame of reference through which we make sense of what we experience. Research and management documents the importance of actors' frames for managerial decision-making, while research in sociology illustrates how leaders purposefully try to shape other people's frames to create alignment, agreement, and mobilization. We marry these literatures with employment relations scholarship on frames of reference by proposing that frames of reference have a cognitive influence on the behavior of employment relations actors. Note that actors can hold frames relating to many issues. We focus here on frames relating to the nature of the employment relationship and how these employment relationship frames can guide action and influence conflicts surrounding human resources approaches, policies, and practices. But there are many other ways in which cognitive framing insights can be applied to issues in employment relations. We start by assuming that managers hold one of 4 frames of reference on the employment relationship. And drawing on the literature on cognitive frames, we then theorize that their particular frame influences the types of HR practices they implement. Contextual and structural factors are important too, but we claim that frames have been overlooked. This can apply to the frames of higher-level managers to make fundamental choices about HR strategy, and it can also apply to the frames of line managers who have many ways of shaping how formal HR policies are implemented. Note that the term cooperative here is in the spirit of worker cooperatives and other organizational forms. It should not be confused with unitarist views of worker cooperation. Next, workers experience these HR policies and practices. And these experiences are interpreted through their own cognitive frames, including any expectations they have based on their frame of reference on the employment relationship. So for workers, the arrows in this diagram represent the resulting desired HR approach rather than the actual approach. This cognitive processing might occur subconsciously and not become salient if these experiences match the employee's expectations. When managers and workers' frames match, we predict that stable patterns of HR practices will endure, similar to what's been identified by other research on ideal types of HR systems. There are various reasons why frames could align, such as intentional organizational efforts to select and socialize workers to fit. But these efforts are imperfect, and there are also many reasons why some workers might have a different frame. In such cases, the HR policies they experience could deviate from their expectations, and we theorize that these workers will engage in a sense-making process. The literature on sense-making sees this as an explicit effort to think about what's going on and what, if anything, they should do about it. Some workers may come to accept what the organization is doing, but for others, this may activate a more conscious recognition of their own frame and a lack of buy-in to the organization's HR approach. So when managers and workers' frames are mismatched, we make additional predictions. First, we expect conflict over HR practices. A large part of our article is hypothesizing the predicted patterns of conflict and expected outcomes depending on the nature of the frame's mismatch. This table gives some simplified examples. We believe that this fuller approach can better explain the diverse pattern of HR outcomes observed in practice than a narrow focus on ideal types, and also why firms in the same industry might have different HR strategies. Another unique contribution of theorizing actors' mismatch frames is that it helps to understand not only situations where employees want more than what managers are giving, for example, managers want more training opportunities or collective bargaining, but also helps us understand the reverse situation in which HR policies and practice do not resonate with some part of the workforce, leaving managers frustrated at a lack of engagement or involvement. So some HR systems might be stable, others might be conflictual, and others might be underutilized. We also theorize that when managers and workers' frames do not match, they have an incentive to engage in both discursive and material activities that encourage others to adopt their frame. In other words, we expect to see framing contests. For example, when faced with an employee desiring union representation, a unitarist manager may attempt to shift the employee's thinking to see the employment relationship as characterized by unity of interest, and thus to perceive unions as unnecessary. If frames become aligned, then there is no longer a mismatch, and we predict that a potential conflict would subside. The outcomes of framing contests will be determined by the relative power of the different actors to impose their particular frame onto other actors, which may contribute to whether conflict is outwardly visible or remains latent. Again, we're not claiming that mismatches will always occur. Workers are not randomly assigned to organizations. Rather, they apply for and accept certain jobs, perhaps based on fit, and they can quit when HR policies do not match their expectations. Many organizations use socialization mechanisms, which could be seen as including framing processes, to influence employee fit, and employees can adapt their expectations to how they are being treated. Nevertheless, mismatch can also occur for various reasons, including limited job opportunities for applicants, selection decisions that overlook fit or prioritize diversity, new organizational leaders, and other shocks that can change manager or employee frames. It's also important to remember that individual line managers can shape employees' experiences with HR practices in many ways, leading to variation in HR practices within an organization. We do not claim that mismatch is more common than alignment. Rather, we maintain that mismatch is something to be taken seriously. We hope this inspires you to take a deeper look at our article. There's a link in the video description. By combining the frames of reference literature in employment relations with the sensemaking and framing literatures in management and sociology, we've created a dynamic cognitive model in which HR practices and outcomes are embedded in employees' and managers' matched or mismatched frames of reference about the structural nature of the employment relationship. But more broadly speaking, our cognitive approach uniquely reveals new opportunities to research framing and discursive contests within organizations and to understand many employment relations issues in a new light. For example, scholarship on managerial resistance to unionization has generally focused on the implications for labor costs and labor control, but a framing perspective also leads to the possibility that managers seek to avoid unionization because a union makes it harder for managers to impose their desired cognitive frame on the employees. As a second example, by recognizing that an individual's cognitive frames are shaped by their identities and past experience, a framing approach can support identity-conscious analyses in employment relations. By illustrating the applicability and usefulness of frame analysis to the employment relationship, we hope to inspire others to extend it.